Greetings, ladies and Murder Johnson. Welcome to today's edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called A Little Lost, written by 107zombly. There he is again. Why doesn't he ever look at the sunrise? Dude's here every morning, and all he ever does is look away from it. I don't get it. Gohal paused for a moment and glanced over at Lahat expectantly, waiting while she maintained her gaze towards the hill. Really? Why is a human even out? We're ages from human-controlled space. Hell, no one here wants anything at all to do with the Deathworld. Maybe he's looking for something else, Lahat finally cut in. Something else? Gohal raised an eye stalk. Yeah, you can see it. He's tracking something. Watch his eyes. They're moving down towards the horizon. Huh. Guess they are, aren't they? Gohal replied thoughtfully. Maybe we can ask him, Lahat ventured. I bet it's something really important, otherwise he wouldn't watch for it every morning. Talk with him? Are you crazy? That thing is an apex predator. I bet he could tear you in half with his bare hands. Gohal was now entirely focused on Lahat, and he smiled panic. But Lahat kept on watching the hill, watching the light blue grass that covered the landscape sway gently, only interrupted by a single tree at the crest, beneath which sat the lone beast, with an arm resting on a knee while it leaned against the dark trunk. Hey, listen to me, Gohal said, giving her a light smack of the back of the head with his thin, bony arm. Ow! That hurt. She turned back towards Gohal, frowning. Sorry, but you can't go talk to him. It's too dangerous. Fine, Lahat conceded, glancing back towards the hill one last time. Hey, is it me, or has that tree got some kind of rot? I think so. You can see some white poking out from under the bark in some places, Gohal replied. So that means it'll die soon, won't it? Probably. Lahat glanced down, frowning just for a moment. Come on. Why don't we go back home now? It's about time to make breakfast. Lahat nodded and followed as Gohal started towards the village opposite the hill, the small stone homes dotting the valley, but the river swaying in its way down through the lot to the lake. They could already see the smoke rising from the cooking fires, and the smell in the air from them was enchanting. But even nearing the bustle of the morning, Lahat couldn't help but look back the way they came, to watch a human at his dying tree, unmoving. Hey, Lahat, could you come here a moment? Lahat heard Gohal call from the other room. Just a moment, she replied, as she danced around the kitchen, dropping dirty dishes into a sink while sweeping up all the grime from the floor. All the while lost in thought, thinking about the noise and busy of her old world, and the quiet and relatively new colony. She had been able to convince Gohal to move out here, despite his paranoia about how dangerous a colony could supposedly be. She didn't buy it, though. And nearly a full cycle later, she felt pretty self-assured. Not a single, even remotely bad occurrence. The closest thing to something dangerous being the support beam in the bedroom looking a little crooked. But Gohal had promised to get that replaced soon, anyway. Lahat! Yes, I'm coming. Lahat glided through the house to study where Gohal sat, staring intently at his datapad. Looking up as she got close, he picked up the pad and handed it to her. Read that, Gohal pressed. Lahat studied the text and tossed the pad back, speaking casually. It's nothing to be considered. Nothing? They were spotted in just the next system over. Why did they come here? He interjected. That's what the Colonial Defense Force is for. To stop pirates and raiders just like these ones. They won't come here. You're getting worked up over nothing, Lahat said with a sigh. Lahat, they were reported to be Zerel. You've heard the stories. I know you have. If they come here, His panic was cut short as Lahat embraced him. I promise. It'll be okay. If it makes you feel better, you can go talk to Sahal. He's in charge of our well-being, so I'm sure he has a plan in place, even if something happens. Gohal let out a breath and squeezed Lahat. Yeah, you're probably right. You know I am, she said, giving a smile. Now, let's get on with the day. There's still plenty to get done today, and fretting about these sorts of what-ifs will only weigh you down. Gohal nodded and let go of Lahat, then shut off the datapad, placing it on the table. He would read more about that later. Reading about what the Colonial Defense Forces do might help put his mind at ease. At least, he was hoping it would. Gohal shot awake at the sound of a loud crack, though it was followed by silence. Looking around in the darkness, he felt around and shook Lahat awake. Hey, did you hear that? Huh? Hear what? I hear something, like an explosion or crack! Okay, I heard that one, Lahat said hesitantly. Should we go take a look to see what's going on? Yeah, Lahat replied, as he got out of bed and fumbled around for a light of some kind, eventually finding an old oil lantern. Lighting the old thing up illuminated the room well enough, but under the dim light, the room looked ever so different. The little trinkets and dresser faintly silhouetted against the grey stone, the hard wooden floor snaking out, away from the light, which bathed it all in a dull yellow-orange tinge. As Lahat got out of bed to join Gahul, a faint scream echoed through the house, clearly having come from somewhere outside. The two glanced at each other, and Gahul began to lead the way through the hamlet, the hallway looking as though they stretched far beyond the darkness, despite their shallow nature. Coming to the door to the kitchen, Gahul stopped for a moment, with his hand on the latch, listening to the ever-loudening screams and evident scamper coming from outside the door. With a breath, he unlatched and opened the door. Beyond the doorframe brought a terrible sight. Gahul saw the horizon filled with fire, chocked black clouds, all rising from the houses on the other side of the village, and the world before him was plastered against the flame. From between the homes stepped a creature, eyes shining red, reflecting the firelight. It was a creature of fur, pale as smoke, had tremendous fangs as they protruded from the sides of its snout, and for a moment it looked at Gahul. We should close the door," Lahat whispered, now holding on to Gahul, faintly shaking. "Yeah, I think you might be right." Yet before Gahul could process the action, the thing had come out of the fire, looked towards them, and it grinned. It was fast, covering the distance in moments, and in panic, Gahul and Lahat simply retreated back into their kitchen. Positioning themselves opposite the door across the table, the thing burst in, glancing around the room with these wicked, glowing red eyes, reflecting now in the lantern light. In haste, Gahul threw the lantern at the beast, hitting instead of the wall beside it, sending shattered glass and hot oil all over the room. Some covered the beast's arm and caused it to cry out in pain, while the rest fell to the floor, catching a flame, and began to light. While the creature was still writhing in pain, Lahat pulled Gahul back, and they ran to the bedroom, slamming the door shut behind them. "Shit, what do you do?" Gahul burst. Can we push the dresser in front of the door?" "No, I don't think so. It's too heavy for just us." "Well, there must be something, anything we can do. Yes, I'm sure." Gahul's thought was cut short by the door exploding open, revealing a rather angry-looking beast with a badly burnt arm, eyes still glowing faintly, and light seeping in through the window. Thump! With a deep growl, it moved forward, preparing to jump at both of them. Gahul placed himself in front of Lahat and outstretched his arms, trying to protect her from the monster. Thump! The window. "Escape through the window, Lahat. I'll slow this thing down. You can go find help." He began to plead. Thump! "What? No, I'm not going to leave you to die." Thump! "Please! You can still make it," Gahul continued. Thump! "I need you to live. At least, He trailed off as he began to notice the sound of the heavy footsteps, followed by a massive figure behind the beast. Thump! He could feel the eyes in the darkness, though they did not glow. They felt cold. Hardly illuminated stood the human from the hill, baring teeth and covered in a thick green blood. Now the beast too paused, but it was too late. The human reached down, gripping the creature's legs, which was followed by the sound of wood breaking, having shattered its bones with its mere grip, causing it to howl in pain and collapse in pain. But the human then lifted him by his shattered legs, grunting as he whipped the beast to the side, as though the thing were nothing, smashing it into and through the door frame and the accompanying wall. And so there it lay, broken, discarded by the human like an old toy. By now the fire had spread throughout the house, and the smoke was making it hard to breathe. The human motioned to the window, and Gahul nodded enthusiastically, opening it and crawling out, turning back towards the burning house once through. As Lahat moved to the window next, the fire began to spread to the support that held the roof, causing it to creak under the newfound strain. Lahat scampered out through the window, but as the human moved to finally do the same, the support gave out, dropping the roof on top of him. "Oh God, is he dead?" Lahat worried. "Must be. There's no way." Again, Gahul was cut short by what he saw before him. The rubble began to move, still burning, and from beneath it, the human stood, lifting the entire roof up off the ground on his back. Throwing the load off, he stepped over the now partially collapsed wall, out of the inferno. Only now did Gahul and Lahat notice the pairs of red eyes glowing out from the darkness around them, but they turned towards the human as he came forward. With the human letting out a roar, the eyes disappeared, the beasts now in flight, and so then it was just as three of them, standing before the blaze of the village. The human's breathing was becoming laboured, and Gahul noticed a tremendous stake of wood protruding from the human's chest, likely coming from the roof. Letting go of Lahat, he moved to the human. "Hey, Are you going to be okay? He asked tentatively. Rather than respond, the human looked past him to the sky and the coming dawn, and he sat down towards his hill and the tree that stood upon it. With every step his breath became harder, and the blood began to trickle down the stake in his chest, mixing with the green and the mud that covered his burns. But he reached that hill. He made the distance to the tree, and when he reached the dying trunk, now fully white and bare of leaves, he allowed himself to rest, to lean upon it, to watch the stars come down to the horizon. But Gahal in the hut stood by and watched. Why do you watch away from the sunrise? Gahal finally asked, listening to the man's wheezing. And finally he spoke. Why? Because I'm a little lost. And it feels like I can see where I'd like to go. And with his gaze on the twilight, his breathing ceased, even as it shadowed, the cold never growing in those eyes, and across his face grew a faint smile. And finally, I think tonight I'm going home. End of story. I'd greatly like to thank our Tier 5 channel members, Caspar Arnholt, John Creighton, Manatharia, 050, Dragzoon WRE, and Elijah Silvercross. Thank you very much.